thank you to all the speakers for a wonderful session. We're a little bit late, but we've been given some pens of 5 minutes for a few questions. So perhaps I'm going to start and ask Mark about this idea of generating galaxies worth of data for every patient is kind of frightening. I think we're going to melt the planet if we store all of it. So I was just wondering, do you have any advice, or how are you thinking about triaging which data is important? How do we, do you compress? Do you put it on ice? Do you just delete? And is there a good rubric for what's data versus what's information and important to store?
It's like a 3-hour symposium. So I always start from the premise of save as much data as possible at the lowest level possible, and only get rid of data if you absolutely have to get rid of data, right? Because you're going to find that inevitably whatever data you deleted or whatever data you didn't collect is going to be exactly the data that you want or need, a year from now, 3 years from now. Now, obviously, you can't go and set up something that can hold all of the data, we need Dyson spheres, right, for the type of power and energy, right, and to do it, if we were really going to do it at the scale that I'm talking about. But so you do have to start somewhere. You do have constraints to start with, but you shouldn't use the constraints as a reason to not collect, right? You should be looking at how can I collect the most possible given the constraints, which I don't know if people can see the difference between those two, but it does make a difference in terms of how you do the work. And as you move forward, you should always be collecting more, right, and more types of data at different levels.
Thank you. And following on this point, maybe a question to Kano. You showed this beautiful diagram of connected hospitals in your in the German ecosystem and sharing data and using that to build foundation models, which I think is, really fascinating. But you said, the idea is that foundation models are going to save us potentially computational cost and, financial cost in terms of training systems. Do we have any idea of how much saving we get? Do you have any examples?
Well, I think there's a misunderstanding because they're incredibly expensive to train in the first place. So right now, I don't think they would save anything if you just go to the training phase. But I mean, we have to remember the chicken sandwich. I have actually written that large here. And that means that it's not necessary to always just train another foundation model. It's very sensible to fine-tune models that you can use. And I think this is the way that it goes. The ability that Llama 3.1 has right now is incredible, and that the new Google models have is incredible. But even if we tried to collect all the data and just train a new model, it would probably be the wrong way. You should fine-tune rarely when you have a very clear use case, and we see that there's a limitation in how well these models understand these very specialized German texts. So this is something where we see the need to go for it. Otherwise, you can go very well with just using different systems. I ran a bit out of time. That's why I skipped over the RAG system so quickly. But this is a great example that you can not only retrain or fine train, you can also just use conversational approaches or things like retrieval augmented reality to improve your output a lot. And you have to be aware these models, they cycle so quickly. We get a release every other month, and that means if you fine tune something, it's for the bin after that time. So I would rather say fine-tune rarely, fine-tune smart, and that's the way to go.
One thing I wanted to ask, and it's really for everybody sitting up here, Margot, I liked what you showed is something that is sort of tangible to individual user, an individual sort of group, and yet allows you to sort of scale up across a project that might involve collaborators or systems. At what point do you all recommend thinking about the difference between institutional or organizational strategy around a data pipeline? And when do you plug in maybe an individual research group or investigator or a handful of investigators who've been working on their data kind of locally? And yes, surgeons like, I've got it on my USB drive, or I've got it on my cloud storage, but just for me. When do these two start to merge and become sort of a unified effort across the ecosystem?
Sure. Well, I mean, ideally from the beginning, right? Now, there's a lot of legacy and a lot of silos you begin with already. So, it's the power of the purse strings, right? So, I have some money, and I let people know in the organization that I have some money, and lo and behold, every data science project, every machine learning project, every AI project across the entire organization comes like out of the woodwork, right? Because I've got it's not a lot of money, it's a couple of $1 million, right? But once I know all of that, now you can start having conversations, right? And you get people bought into that vision, right? There's a whole series of slides we didn't get into where we do have a whole enterprise data strategy around a series of enterprise data products that we're building out. But it's worth remembering that the enterprise data products are not going to solve all your problems. You're still going to need a research-specific data lake, a commercial-specific data lake, an innovation-specific data lake that's going to sit on top of those. So you need to have sort of a distributed model, but you want to get people bought in and recognizing the value that they're going to get from participating as part of the organization, as opposed to just trying to do it on their own. Again, the chicken sandwich thing, right?
Yeah, maybe to add to that, so from the beginning, that's as best as possible, but the problem really manifests when the model's in production, because AI is actually a team sport once it's in a product and once it's being utilized in the real world. And this is to the chagrin of myself and other machine learning engineers that we are very much like lone wolves who like to code on ourselves, but to actually get this stuff working, properly interacting with people, interacting with product managers, interacting with the customers, the users, you need to have collaborative tooling so that they can work together.
Maybe following on that collaborative tooling and the ecosystem, and I totally agree with it. Bit of a strange question, but how much of the pipeline then do you put in a QMS? Excellent.
In the what?
Moving on.
Well, do you want to break down the QMS thing?
No, because it's a difficult one. Well, I guess as little as you can get away with would be my answer. I had another slightly nebulous question. It was more about kind of cybersecurity, or thinking. Recently we had a case in the UK where some systems got hacked, and people's information on bloods was leaked, and it caused a huge problem, and it sort of, in many ways, potentially has digressed our ability to work with infrastructure by some way. So what's our thinking in terms of the pipelines we build today and how we ensure that, that security bit is there? I know that there's standards and protocols, but, are there things that could happen in the future that are going to actually be harmful to this field or developing?
Yeah, I think I would like to take that. So we have to be aware that these kind of cyber threats are getting more and stronger, and people realize that they are very effective, and I don't think this topic is going to go away anytime soon. And with any of these considerations, it's going to be a risk versus reward kind of thing. If we just put the risk at the forefront and say, then it's just not possible to do so, we will lose the ability to do effective cloud computing. On the other hand, there are actually quite concrete considerations on how good cybersecurity has to be implemented, and the European Union, for example, especially, is looking in the same turn that they're now looking at the unification of data sharing across the European Union, also in how computing clusters could be used to work with that data that needs to be anonymized in the first place. So you are not going to be able to download that data, you are going to have to work with it in a certified center. So this kind of topic is absolutely completely necessary and won't go away. And the second part is, I think we have to realize that the absolute vast majority of breaches is not through technical means, but through social engineering. And so much as we can do, there's always going to be someone who's just going to give out the password.
I completely agree. I think it's not a matter of if it will happen, when it happens, and how we handle it. Yeah.
So I was just going to say, audience questions, this is perfect. Nasir.
I have a question not directly related, but very often we hear patients should share their data. And then they give the examples that we are sharing our data already on my mobile phone. But when we share on mobile phone, when I share on mobile phone, I get a free service. If I have to share and I have to pay €100, I'm not sharing. And nobody I heard how they guarantee that the people who share the data can afford the healthcare solution which comes out of it. How can we guarantee or have a pathway that people who are sharing their data, don't tell me, oh, it's good for healthcare, No, it's not good for healthcare. It's good for people who make money. How would a patient get benefit directly, not by paying less for that effort? Can the companies put a Bitcoin each time they get a data, and that Bitcoin is used for people to reduce their cost when they want to go to the patient, to the doctor, or to get out of it? Is there any business model that makes the patient be willing to share it to make sure that they can afford the outcome?
I think firstly, everyone this year gets free phones, so it's good to know. I think it's a great question, and I'll pass it to the
Anybody
panel.
want to take that?
So it's a very good question. It's a interesting topic to think about ethically, and I don't have a good answer for the short or the medium term, but for the long term, I think a good analogy to think about is chess. So chess supercomputers, they came out 20, 30 years ago. They were available to only the most elite grandmasters to really improve their play and top performance. And over time, that did propagate down to just the regular chess player. Now if I go on my phone, I can use the advancements that were made 30 years ago to get better at chess. And I think the same trajectory happens for all technologies. It will happen with healthcare. So it will come down to just a matter of time and when. But for the short and medium term, I don't have a good solution.
So I've played around with the unit economics of this a little bit, right? And when you think about the fact that there are healthcare life sciences companies that will pay, $1,000, $2,000 for an individual patient's medical record, right? If it's it's attached to a biorepository and you've got the right radiological images and you've got the right disease and all the rest of it, right? You'd sort of think, well, why can't I just give $1,000 to the patient, right? And you give them a direct benefit. But the truth of the matter is that $1,000 is not only, or the $2,000 is not only covering that, it's also covering all of the other patients that have to come along as your denominator, right, to go along with that numerator. And so if you actually look at the economics of it and you start to think, well, what if we actually really opened this up, right, where you were, as a patient, you were now being pinged by tens or hundreds or thousands of these, and you look at the total number of dollars in the market, well, it's a large number of dollars. At the end of the year, in your crypto account, you'd probably have like $15.22, right? Like, it's not going to make a material difference in your life. So it does have to be some other kind of incentive other than a financial one.
Maybe it's just part of what society should offer, right? Ensuring that there's healthcare access, and then this is just one of the features of what healthcare access is going to be.
I will very strongly agree here, Dan. So I think in general, it's very hard to give monetary compensation for any kind of these services because that automatically creates an incentive for disadvantaged people to share more. It's the same reason why someone that you can't donate a liver and get paid for that. I think, as Dan said, we need to make donating data something that's systematic on a national level, and I'm very glad that Germany just enabled that with the opt-out system for the EPA and the standardized data sharing processes. And once you have that, you can create measures that allow the patients to benefit indirectly, for example, by getting warnings, by getting reminders, by getting specific requests that leverage their health, and hopefully, if you are able to increase the quality of health, that means that the cost of healthcare goes down, and this is an indirect benefit. I mean, it's a bit harder to motivate for the patient, I agree, but it has to be systematic in the social state.
In the last minute, I want to ask one last question. So on that note, Margot, you're at a nonprofit that helps, as far as I can understand, sort of like democratize this process a little bit for people who may not have access to resources like Northwell or what have you. What's been the approach to try to make sure that people who may not have a Northwell organized sort of system to contribute data are able to do so, and how does that impact sort of downstream healthcare?
So a lot of the collaborators we work with they either don't have a lot of data or they don't have access to compute, for example. We usually will have one or the other, where someone might have a lot of data and they want to do something with it. So they will come to us and be like, I've been gathering videos for the past 10, 20 years, but I don't know what to do with them. Can you do something with it? And they trust us because of the NGO status. We don't make any money. We don't profit from the money from this. We just build the tool for the research, for the impact. Our whole goal is to have an impact. So we will the platform that I showed you, the surgical video platform, is a free tool, and clinicians, surgeons can just go and use it and upload their videos. And then, for example, if you upload a case that you did last week and you want to get some specific analytics on it, you will be able to get them and then export them. That is really useful for a lot of people who want to do clinical research. So they have a lot of these videos, like I mentioned, and then they will go upload their videos, their procedures, and then they will be able to export all of the different features that we extract with our computer vision models, and then do clinical research on that data. So for example, if we have one group right now that wants to research the specific usage of the curette in pituitary tumor surgeries, and so they're able to do that just by using the platform, but they might not have the compute to actually train the first computer vision model, to have an ML team, data scientists. They are not cheap teams, and so that is how we usually we go with it. And then in terms of people who want to train their own model, we have a reusable pipeline that we will open for people when they want to do a collaboration with us.
That's great. All right. Time-wise, I think we're up, is my understanding, but thank you very much, and I think we're going to move right into the next session.